We're finally doing this, Pierre.
Finally
We
do it.
talked about doing this gall darn podcast for way too long. It's exciting.
Yes. 11 years. Than my kid.
Made Daily. Hello and welcome to the Made Daily podcast. I'm John Michael Thomas.
I'm Pierre Hegeman.
Made Daily covers our favorite online stories from tech to social media.
Our expert thoughts and opinions about information security, website design, and development.
And other random stories from the internet. This week's episode of the Made Daily podcast is made possible by Cinemechanics, the premier camera and lens rental house. When you're shooting your next film or streaming series, Cinemechanics will make sure your project stays next level.
And Made Daily version 5, the all-in-one secure website builder with built-in data collection tools and secure customer portals.
And one of our way back internet favorites, all your base are belong to us.
Somebody definitely set up us the bomb. Today we're going to start with 2.9 billion records, including social security numbers, stolen in a data hack, and what to know.
So this was a big story. Broke like a couple weeks ago. Or I heard about it a couple weeks ago, but it's back from, looks like, April. National Public Data, who is used to provide background checks on everybody, was massively hacked.
Yeah, it doesn't say how the attackers got their data, but they managed to capture the whole database from National Public Data. Like you said, they do background checks, and it had unencrypted social security numbers. It had 277 gigabytes worth of customer data, sensitive information.
The hacking group, US DoD, which I thought was kind of funny. They wanted $3.5 million. They were looking for a buyer for the data on the dark web.
Okay, so here's the thing about social security number breaches. All of our social security numbers have probably been lost at one point or another. So another social security number breach isn't significantly adding to our overall risk profile. You should probably continue doing the things that you're already doing. Keep track of your credit monitoring, right? Most banks and most credit cards now are providing like a credit report for free. They just send it to you in your email, right? So keep an eye on that. Make sure you're not getting any new accounts opened. If you're really paranoid about it, or if you got a notification from your bank that there's suspicious activity or that you were definitely part of this breach, you can freeze your credit profile, and that'll stop. It stops the credit bureaus from running credit checks on you, so people can't open accounts in your name. And also, the kind of nice side effect is then the credit bureaus can't share your data anymore, and so they can't sell it to advertisers.
I just did this actually again, but you got to go to Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. You got to hunt around in their sites because they try to funnel you into paying for their background check service, but you can find the free freeze and hold. It is a big pain in the ass though. If you're try to go, get an Apple card or get a new car, you gotta deal with unfreezing that, and sometimes that can delay you by a little bit of time while you go through that process. But it's definitely worth it, I think, to make sure that that's closed up and keep people from accessing your stuff. The irony with these credit card companies though too is they've all been hacked
multiple times.
So I mean, you're trying to trust these agencies who collect this data on you automatically, and we really don't have any control over that. I know a long time ago, when this was a few years ago, there was that site that started Have I Been Password Owned, pwned.com. That was enlightening, putting my email address that I've had forever in there, and it's everywhere.
One thing that I wanted to kind of circle back around on is I don't think that it's clear, especially from a lot of the news coverage, how bad that company's general security practices had to have been for this data breach to happen in this way, right? For an attacker to be able to get in and get the entire customer database, including unencrypted social security numbers, 277 gigabytes worth of data on people and their families, that means there was no segmentation of data. There was no encryption going on. The security posture for this national public data company was really quite terrible. Unfortunately, I've seen this a lot in really larger companies, especially small companies that get big really fast, or large companies that start acquiring a lot of other companies. When they try to start merging these systems together, the security is always an afterthought. It should be and is illegal, but I think the consequences for not protecting customer data are not high enough, and really we need some new laws to increase the consequence for not taking care of data in this way.
Yeah, this past April too, around this time, there was this marketplace story, the radio show, and it wasn't a they did a profile on a business that got hacked, and it wasn't a big company, but luckily they had one person on staff who knew what to do, and they walked through the protocols, and it just sounded like a nightmare. Like, shut everything down as fast as possible, try to rebuild back to previous updates. I'd never heard kind of how the process would go, and they were trying to thwart ransomware attack, I believe. But I mean, it's just a big thing that you kind of have to stay vigilant.
Let me back up a little bit. There used to be this thing called a perimeter, right, where you would have your firewalls, and people would consider, the network was like candy, right? Hard and crunchy on the outside, soft and chewy on the inside. We're trying to not do that anymore, right? So you want protection all the way through. So if somebody were to gain access to my laptop, it shouldn't be any easier for them to get to customer data or a management network from my laptop than it is from the outside. The goal is protection on all the systems, regardless of how they connect to the network. So from a business perspective, depends on your size, right? If you're a small to medium-sized business, you want to make sure you're keeping your systems updated, right? So don't let your software expire. Don't turn off the automatic patching on your computers, right? Always, always, always be patching. When you're buying services from third parties, which most businesses are going to have to do, you want to make sure that your vendors are following good security practices, right? So they should have documentation around what are their policies. They should have a privacy policy. They should have a data use policy. They should have, all of this should be documented and available for you. And if it's not, that's something of a red flag.
It used to be it did used to be a problem about updating like Mac OS, because none of the other like creative software would be up to speed. So you'd upgrade, and then Final Cut Pro would stop working.
Right.
So that at least that's been alleviated now, where I feel confident. I just tell people, run the updates, and then if you have an issue, update your software, because they're staying on top of it now.
There's always a new version of Mac OS available, right? But you don't necessarily have to be on the latest version of Mac OS to be secure, right? As long as Apple is still providing patches, or Microsoft is still providing patches for your version, then you're okay, right? You don't need to upgrade. Like for me, especially with my development environment, it is a giant pain to move between the major versions, because all my stuff stops working for a while, right? But I can stay patched, and then when the systems start falling off and start losing support, that's when you need to upgrade, and I'll usually jump from whatever I'm on to the latest one, so I don't have to do it again for a while.
So then, as an individual, to protect yourself after a data breach, or maybe even to do this now, so you're being proactive, freeze your credit. Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. That makes it harder for people to open up an account in your name. Monitor your financial activity. Check those bank statements. If anything looks suspicious on your bank or credit card reports, you don't get it reported right away. I've heard another thing that's not on this list, which is, it's not always the best idea to use a debit card, because you don't get the security that you get from the credit card holder. I know not everybody can have a credit card, but debit cards are not, and don't carry them around. Don't carry them around in your wallet either. Enable two-factor authentication.
Yeah.
And then stay alert for phishing scams. And what's a phishing scam, Pierre?
Phishing is when you get an email that looks like it's from a legitimate provider, say FedEx or Amazon, or something that you're likely doing business with anyway, but it's not from them, and the goal is to get access to either your information or your payment card or your account for that provider. Phishing can look very, very close to the real thing, so you have to be careful. Watch for URL domain names, right? Like if there's a link in the email and it says it's going to FedEx, but you look at the domain name and it's not FedEx.com, don't trust it. If you're not expecting a notification from a company, generally most companies, and especially most large companies, are not going to be sending you emails asking for your information, right? So if that's, just expect that it's going to be phishing, right?
Yeah.
Is what I would say, unless you're expecting a communication from them. And then oftentimes you can call and ask, is this legitimate? Although getting somebody at Amazon's can be a challenge.
And don't do like I did a couple of weeks ago and click the link.
I mean,
I got a correspondence from a client to a thing, and just kind of out of habit, right? I clicked the link out of habit. I click links all the time, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And it worked out that, I got to a page where they wanted me to put in my login. I was like, yeah, I'll stop there. It felt fishy at that point, but that's what you got to be aware of, right? It can happen. It can happen to anybody at any time, and
it's not all doom and gloom. So what's up next?
Okay. Cookie notifications. What are they? What do they do? And why do we think they suck or not suck? And should you have one or not one if you're a business? So a cookie notice, what is a cookie notice? Let's just level set there. If you haven't seen one, we'll put one up, but it's a notification that informs visitors about the type of content or about the types of cookies being used on the website and how their personal data will be collected and who may have access to it.
Sometimes it's called a cookie wall, right? Because you can't get through to the site until you click it, and there's no way to reject it. But yeah, the
pop-up or alert that could be tracking your browser activity. So I had actually a question about this, because we notice them a lot when we're browsing the web, but we don't always know we're being tracked when we're using an app that we downloaded on our phone, because they're not required to prompt you. So the things that people track are sessions, right? So what a session cookie is, something that's erased once you close your browser. And so that might be something like you added something to a shopping cart, or it wants to remember your login info, right? And now we have protocols where they automatically delete that after 30 days if you've never closed your browser, which is a good practice. Persistent cookies, so those stay. They remain on your device. And they might be shared across different preference sessions. First-party cookies are set by the website you're visiting. Again, helping to remember your preferences. So, Pierre, is that something like if I had a couple settings on an app that would store that? Is that, it's not always stored by a cookie, but that's what this would be, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can store settings, but a cookie is one of. So, a cookie is nothing magical, right? It's just a file that gets saved on your computer. They came from Netscape in 1996 when these guys wanted to be able to save a shopping cart, actually. And all it is, it comes from a Unix programming term called Magic Cookie, which is a little piece of data that you would send into the program, and it would send it back out unchanged. And that's really what it's doing. The server sets this file, or tells the browser to set this file. The browser stores it wherever it wants. And then on the next request and future requests, the browser just sends it back unchanged. So it's a way for web servers, which don't store state by themselves, to keep a stateful connection, to remember that you're you, and that I'm me and we're different. And then, unfortunately, it's been abused by shady companies and others to track your motions and do other underhanded things.
Like a third-party cookie, which is a
Yeah,
Facebook pixel.
Facebook Pixel,
Tracking your Google Pixel.
Yeah, when the service tells the browser to store the cookie, it can include with that a little note that says, don't send this back to me if you're not using an encrypted connection, or SSL, right? That would be what's considered a secure cookie. The thing to remember about that is, even though it has a little check mark in the browser that says secure, that doesn't make that cookie actually secure. Sure, the browser won't send it back if the connection isn't encrypted, but it's very likely that the data inside the cookie on your computer is not encrypted, unless the application that's sending you that cookie has encrypted it beforehand, right? So watch out for that. Even if it says secure, it might not actually be. So all these cookie walls all started in 2016 when the European Union implemented a law called the General Data Protection Regulation, right? GDPR. So, which said that every citizen of the EU has the right to know when they're being tracked, right? So what that means is, when they're being tracked and how they're being tracked, right? So what that means is all of the websites have started to have to notify people, because you don't know when a citizen of the EU is going to be visiting your website versus a citizen of somewhere else. So they're just putting them up for everybody, right, to say we're using these tracking cookies. Now, one really great way to not have to put up a cookie wall is to not do mass surveillance. Just one thought, right? Like, so at Made Daily, our analytics doesn't use a cookie, so we don't have to put a cookie wall up there, right? Because we're not doing any of the kind of tracking that requires notification from, according to GDPR, right? Because technically, if the only type of cookie you're using is required for the functioning of the site, you don't actually have to put a notification for that. So all we do is we track shopping carts and we track logins, right? So we don't have to do that. But if you are using, say, Google Analytics or Facebook Pixels or any of the other tracking software that's following you across the internet, this is all 100% for advertising, right? Google puts cookies on your computer so they can follow you around, see the websites that you visit, so they can serve you ads that are more likely to be products that you're going to click on. One thing that a lot of companies are doing, they're just saying, we don't care, we're not going to do this because it's a European law, and they're just saying let them sue us, because chances are they probably won't, unless they're large, right? Target probably would want to be careful, Amazon certainly, and Google, but smaller companies are just saying we don't care about the EU, which personally I think is kind of a mistake. I think that everybody should have the right to privacy and should know who's tracking them. So Europe may be ahead of the curve, but I'm hoping that we'll start getting more legislation in this country to protect customer privacy, because we do not need to be monitored all the time, everything that we do, by these gigantic corporations that don't have any accountability to anyone.
So do you think then people should be having them?
I think that if
Facebook pixel tracking them, you should.
You should. Yes. Well, I guess it's up to you. It is an impediment to usability on your site for sure. People are kind of used to them now, and they're just clicking through them. But so I would say, if you can get away with it, your best bet is to use an analytics software that doesn't do mass surveillance, right? Then you don't have to worry about it. Everybody's happy. If you can't do that, then I think your best option is to then be upfront about it and put the notification on your site. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. And then I would say, from the design side, if you design them, try to make them so they're legible. This site's CSS is taken over, and you can't read the yellow text on green at all. It's down here at the bottom. And these are notoriously ugly looking, and something design firms and agencies could pay a little attention to. The same with, accessibility widgets and all that stuff too.
Yeah, the accessibility there is terrible. Yeah. But I almost thought that on that one, that the little box with the knobs was the cookie banner, and actually that would be kind of fun. So there may be an opportunity for having a little fun with it.
But hey, it's not skip intro, but it's kind of like skip intro. So this is a local story for us. So the Minneapolis Star Tribune got a new brand, which is common when a company gets a new CEO. A lot of times we see this. Here's the old mark, and they went and changed it to be. Oh, here we go. I got this big old thing in the way. So they got a new brand, and now we've been renamed the Minnesota Star Tribune, and we've got a new icon with the mark that's a 4-sided star versus a 5-pointed star that points north, south, east, west, all directions of the state, which I thought for a rebrand was a pretty nice, a really nice way to go about it. Of course, they hired a very well-known advertising firm called Cole McVoy, which has been around forever in the Twin Cities, who was named Adweek's 2003 Agency of the Year. And, it's kind of interesting. So, the Star Tribune was a 157-year-old company, and it's one of the oldest operating publications in the state of Minnesota, having been founded in 1867, the same year Minneapolis was incorporated as a city. They're looking to be more inclusive of the whole state, and we used to have Minneapolis Star Tribune and the St. Paul Pioneer Press, and you kind of trade news from both. But it was the Minneapolis Morning Tribune back in 1867. And the new redesign, reflects the challenges and the transition traditional publishers face compared to social media platforms and other digital content creators.
I like it. I mean, the new logo looks nice. And it feels fitting for the paper to be a Minnesota paper. We do that here, right? We're not the Minneapolis Vikings. It's the Minnesota Vikings.
Right.
It's not the or it's St. Paul Wild.
Right.
It's the Minnesota Wild. It's, I think Minnesota is really good about including the whole state in sort of these organizations.
Yeah, I think it was a good, for rebrands. I think it was a very smart, intelligent rebrand. I'm certainly more intrigued to want to check it out more. I'm not a subscriber to it. And I find it interesting that there's a lot of massive ads on this site, which interrupts the experience, and then you eventually you can like view an article and get like locked out. You have to subscribe, um, which I find interesting because they're a business built on subscriptions, right? Dropping off papers on doorsteps. But we're in this time now where uh, a lot of news gets done by content creators on various platforms that are pushing stuff out for free. And in some ways, they're drawing on the major news outlets for their stories, which is sort of an interesting thing. And I am interested to see what they do um, in those channels, and if I'm going to start to get some news stories from them, because it would be great to sort of be a bigger source, not just Minnesota but the Midwest. The New York Times, it's got a good pulse on being New York, but also worldwide, and I think they have an opportunity to do that. Um, particularly, I mean, they do a great job with the variety section of featuring like what's going on with movies, films, TV, and events, and small businesses and things. So it would be really great to kind of dive into this a little bit more. Um,
Well, from a security perspective, like just as a society, I think it's absolutely critical that we have um, independent journalists reporting on the things that are happening, and for we here in Minnesota, we can't rely on the New York Times to
right.
report on our news, right? So we have to have local journalists, and those journalists have to get paid. So I say, support your local papers. Get a subscription. It's because without these news sources, NPR is a fantastic source of news, right? The Strib, you know, like any of the local papers, we are absolutely critical to our society, because without them, then we run the risk
Mm-hmm.
of disinformation being, because you can't rely on some random person on YouTube to know anything, right? And if we're all on our own to determine who's trustworthy and who's not, it's kind of a wild, wild west of information. And it's that is how societies fall. So we really need independent journalists. So they're absolutely critical. So I am 100% in favor of supporting the Strip.
Yeah, 100%. And there are times where um, the local news does a better job of actually telling what's happening and what's true
Mm-hmm.
than the national mainstream media. Um, so let's talk a little bit about this site. I actually think they've with the new rebrand, they did a really nice job, like having kind of a modernized font of the old newspaper. I'm still not a huge fan of these ads, though. These ads are massive. I can't get through uh, without. I can resize for responsive. Another one pops up. I personally find this stuff to be so obtrusive now and just tend to ignore it. And so it answers, it's sort of like, I haven't signed up. It would be great if you were a member and this stuff went away, but I don't know that because um, I don't have an online subscription with them. Something I should consider, but it
They
just gets to be like, it's
they
just overwhelming.
yeah, they keep the ads, and it's such a bad experience. Like, they're not well placed. They are a huge performance drain. Actually, these ad networks are also a vector for malware a lot of
Yeah.
times, because they can be hacked and they can start spreading um, malicious software. It's just not good. And I wish that they could make enough money on subscriptions, if that's what they're doing to make it. But
And th- and this is probably the, you know, a thorn in the side of the UX designers of this page, who've done actually a pretty nice job. I would say it's cool to see the weather being implemented, and this nice change when you scroll. You get the main newspaper sections, and then again you get this kind of widget for the latest, and it's really nice, clean, well, easy to read. The paragraph isn't so stinking wide, and I do like that they let the images go full width to the content width, and kept this stuff. It makes it really easy to read, and it's a really nice looking site. They've done their job to make this work well for responsive design. So you can see there's a mobile experience. Again, it's got that same tidiness to it, easy to read, easy to touch and click on, good information hierarchy. It's nice to see sections and things. And it's nice to see that we've gotten to a place now where people are modeling these paradigms and making just stuff nice and easy to use. All right, now for our fun one, a little trip back to the Wayback Machine, and let's talk about this internet meme. All your base are belong to us.
What happened? Someone set up us the bug. We get signal. What? Main screen turn on. It's you.
How are you, gentlemen? All your base are belong to us.
This dropped in like the 2000s, and I remember seeing this and going, "What the heck is this?" And it was kind of one of those things where a bunch of kids or whomever did it took a video game and made a meme out of the original game Zero Wing from 1989.
It's like a techno song, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
The EDM remix was uploaded to your YouTube about 18 years ago, and it just became sort of a joke, and it even spread rapidly. And this predated the Rickroll, and it was kind of one of those things where it was being used like that with people, and I think it's hilarious. And we can take a little.
Next
a little peek at it.
Never give you up. I never let you down.
And then in this instance, they took the opening of the video game and then started making other assets, and it was happening in real life too, which was funny. Like, people were hacking road signs, and just really silly. And I just remember this one being like one of those kind of viral moments before there was viral was really a thing. Then just took over. I think actually Rickroll might have been before this, because Rickroll would get sent out in emails. You get a link, and all of a sudden you'd be surprised with a web page with Rickroll on there. True relic of internet history that still pops up in the meme culture, and hopefully it'll start being circulated again. Thanks for joining us today. If you want to check out any of the stories or topics we covered, head over to madedaily.com. And if you have a story you'd like to share or a site you'd like reviewed, please leave us a comment.
And don't forget to subscribe.
Until next time. Made Daily.